and also
epic lows, but
and epic. Well, I don't even know lows or blows. You know.
it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get to this podcast. I mean, you and I, it seems like we could talk forever being two Aries now that I figured that one out. Because like I said, some parts of your book that I read, I was like, dang, I'm like, this man's reading my mind. So there's a lot there. So anyhow, it's funny that we went through similar journeys. You're just in, well, you had the other stuff too. Okay. How do you say your last name, Robert? Althuis?
Actually, no, it's Althuis. So it's just like as if it's house in English.
Yeah. Okay.
Althuis.
Althuis. Okay. And I think that's it. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Ready when you are. Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Be Bold, Fierce, Unstoppable. I'm your host, Zach Lioutas. And today we have Robert Althuis. He's an author of Never Enoughitis and a founder of the Sacred Wealth Institute, a mindfulness organization that provides coaching, strategy tools, and techniques for visionary leaders seeking a deeper purpose and visionary businesses seeking to become a force of good in the world. This Ivy League educated leader was once a Fortune 100 corporate executive and later successful real estate and private equity entrepreneur. Today, he resides in Coral Gables, Florida, and is a father, artist, photographer, avid yogi, CrossFitter, kite surfer, and an active dive volunteer and former board member of the Coral Restoration Foundation in the Florida Keys. Hello, Robert. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Zach. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Whenever I hear that description, I'm always like, who's that guy? But I guess we all have that to some extent with our own bio. But yeah, that's me.
It's true. You don't realize how far you've come in the world until you listen to someone saying your bio, and you're like, "Damn, that's me." Like, yeah, you made it.
Or you're reminded how old you are.
How wise. I don't like to say the word old. I like to say the word
wise. Wise is better. Wise is better.
How wise you are. I always say when my grays come out, I'm like, my grays are just a sign of my wisdom, y'all. That's all.
There you go.
So I love your book, Never Enoughitis. I'm going to show everyone the Never Enoughitis. We got it right here. It was a great book. I think every corporate man or highly determined, successful, money-driven man should read this, because you give a lot of incredible information on many things, especially the ego. So I'm trying to think in my head, I'm calling my guide saying, where do we start with this? Because there's so much to talk about, from the moment you met your now former wife, Cara. She sounded like a badass in the book. She got exactly what she wanted, but you were chasing her for a bit. And then what really got me into your story was when you guys were heading to your destination wedding and the snowstorm happened.
Right.
And it was like, there was never a moment where you said, we can't figure this out. You just kept on going and finding a solution. But then you had to change airports and you had to drive. And you said to Cara at that time, it's okay, I've driven in snow. And she called you out on your BS because there's no snow in Holland. And I was like, damn, girl, good on you. But that's how she fell in love with you, and off she went, right? So many great parts there. But what keeps you so determined in just not allowing roadblocks to get in your way?
I have to give my father some credit for that, even though he's the one I've been fighting most of my whole life, because I really, was always seeking his adulation, right, his approval. But my father was, he was can I say motherfucker? He was a stoic motherfucker.
Whatever you want.
He was a stoic motherfucker, if there ever was one. And I was the youngest of three sons, and very early on, we had jobs. We were 5, 6 years old. If you ever wanted something, you had to work for it. Little chores in the garden, wash his car. My mom had a woman's boutique. We did like these mailings, and we would fight. Like we get 15 cents an envelope, and we would literally be like, biking all over our little town and delivering these envelopes to our clients. And I don't know. He just taught me that you just keep going. There was just, and when we played sports, and both my brothers were pretty good athletes, my oldest one especially, and I was pretty talented. But he was always more interested in how hard you fought than how good you were. He admired grit. And so I think in a way we all kind of got that kind of spoon fed in, and I still have plenty of that. I still have plenty of fire. It's kind of modified a little bit. There's a little bit of wisdom around it now, because it was also, in a way, I had a little too much of it, right? And so I also was obsessed with taking obstacles in life where I could have just walked around them rather than just annihilate and go straight through them, which, I mean, it honed my skills and my willpower and all that stuff. But, I could have made life a little easier for myself as well. But in that situation that you were describing, and it's even further in the book, right, when we go to Mexico, I do believe there's this dance between the masculine and the feminine. And I think one of the things that we bring to the equation for her is that it's all going to be okay. And that's one of the most important things that we can bring when there's a crisis, even when we don't know how the fuck we're going to solve it. And I actually believe that there's this interplay between the feminine and the masculine. And, when you have a powerful feminine in your life as the masculine, it actually gives you wings. Right. So it makes you more masculine. It makes you more powerful. It makes you more fueled, because, you want to take care of her, your family. I mean, these are like, things that she awakes in you. Right. Her love awakes that in you. And, I loved her. And so I wanted her to have her wedding. I wanted her to get down there. And I saw that she was sad about it. So it was like, it irked me as a man. I was just like, fuck, we're going to get down there. I don't care what it takes.
And I know this because I asked him before the show, but said like a typical Aries, I'll do whatever it takes, because it's so true.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that too. So there's a little bit of fire in me,
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a part of the book that I was like, you hit it bang on, Robert. And you said, a woman just wants to know that she's safe and protected. And when you said that, I was like, every man needs to actually read this book, because they don't realize, yes, women could be complicated. Yes, men could be complicated. But when we do have the divine feminine and masculine energy marrying both in one, we do open up a whole other area that we maybe have not even experienced in our life. And when you have that sense of protecting your woman, watching over her, and not saying watching over her as in just being codependent or dependent on it, but in a place where you're giving that place of safety and security, a woman's heart opens up even more, saying, hey, you know what? I feel safe here. I feel like I could speak about anything I want to say. I feel like we could do so many things together, because there's this meshing, or there's this intertwining of energies here that are just growing and developing. So you guys got it down to Mexico. And the thing is that there was a fire where you're supposed to have, where you get married. And this is the whole thing when we were talking about Mexico and everything else that happened, but the wedding did go on. So that was a beautiful thing.
Let me intercept, because I want to make a nuance. I actually believe that a woman cannot love you unless she first trusts you.
Yeah, I have that actually underlined here. I wanted to talk about that.
She might give you what looks like love, but it's not true love. And this is like, we have to go back like thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, right? And so for a woman to open up, to be vulnerable, is like risking her life. Because, we can seriously harm her, which still happens way too much. And so, you know, we as men have to relate to that, that this trust, this physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety, like this is a deep rooted ancestral need that she has. And if we cannot provide that, it's not love what you're getting. You know, she might, you know, what I call that transactional love in my book.
Mhm.
But, you know, she's just doing a business deal. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because you are also doing a business deal, but that's not true love. That's not what you really want from her. That's not the stuff that's going to give you wings.
Very true. Very true. And you could crack open a woman's heart. And I know this because I've been in a twin flame relationship. And when I felt that energy and that vibration that came from my male counterpart when we were together, I've never felt that kind of energy before. And when we were together, I was ready for this relationship. I was like, oh, fuck yeah, I could handle this. This is exactly where I want to go. But because he was just starting his spiritual journey, it was too much for him. I can't handle this. This is too much. I don't think I could do it in this lifetime. And that's when, 9 months later, he walked out and I was just like, I'm just going to let you go because I love you too much to try to chase you. You need to figure you out. And this is a part, guys, I want to read this part where Robert was talking about the trust, because on page, I got to put my glasses on to see this, page 287, he says this: enjoying her love and divine body is like being immersed in sweet nectar. Nothing compares and nothing will illuminate your masculine essence as much as the love of your goddess. However, the feminine cannot give herself and love you in the way that moves mountains, parts oceans, and open skies unless she can trust you. And I had that underlined, so you channeled that out of what I was wanting to talk to you about.
Right.
And I think that's so true. When we have that sense of trust with our male counterpart, we have that ability to have that RH moment that you mentioned in the book, to talk about your fantasies, to talk about your dreams, to talk about your wishes, and have that collaboration with two people where we're not having this judgment. Because when we start to get to know one another and dating one another, there is this judgment. Is she for me? Is he for me? Can he support me? Can she love me? There's just, because we're trying to fill in these voids or these past wounds that we may be still holding on to. So we're finding an external source trying to fill that in. So when did you understand that when a woman could trust you, she could crack open her heart for you? And that's when the mountains could shift at that point.
Yeah, I'd say I did a lot of work around my divorce, actually, because, the divorce was a watershed moment, and that it really pierced my heart open. I did the integration work of the feminine energy around that time, which ironically, when you open your heart and you integrate the feminine energies as a man, you're actually become more masculine, which sounds really kind of paradoxical. But that's truly what happens. You're putting your masculinity actually on steroids. And but this really just happened because I was heartbroken about my divorce. It was my second divorce. I thought that was gonna just be a walk in the park because I was the one that instigated it. But I really, really had a lot of unresolved emotions around it. And so I went into therapy, and as I was going through that, I really started reading and looking into this. And I started learning about David Dita's work, and I started reading books, monumental books like the Way to Superior Man and things like that. And I started understanding that there's this language, there's this dance, there's this sacred orchestra that takes place between the masculine and the feminine, and I just never really understood that. I never really had full appreciation for that. And it's not like when we roll off the factory line at 18 that we all have been fully trained as lovers and partners. I mean, we don't know shit, right? And we're just fumbling our way around. And, I grew up in a very liberal country, Holland, but it also has a lot of really screwed up perceptions because, when I went to university, the university is actually in the red light district, which everybody in Amsterdam thinks is fantastic. And we pride ourselves in Holland on having basically legalized prostitution because they pay taxes and they have health insurance. But, I asked you, which 7-year-old girl is sitting on the swing dreaming to be a prostitute? Right? None. You find me one. Find me one, right? And so, who are the women that end up in that world. And these are women that are emotionally, physically abused, come from foster parents, come maybe from foreign countries. In Holland, there's a lot of Thai and other nationalities represented there. Look at what and then you start realizing, and this is like connecting the dots in life, right? That in life, demand creates supply. And so I never looked at my life that way. So when I am this hotshot investment banker guy floating around, snorting a line of coke here and there, I have actually the blood in Tijuana in my nose. Because I am creating that that drug violence in Mexico. And once you start looking at the world that way, is that maybe the next time you jerk off to porn, right? You think, well, there might be a girl there that is going to be used for 3 or 4 movies, and then she's going to basically relegate it to strip clubs, and from strip clubs she'll end up in prostitution. Because it's just how that industry works. It just chews through this kind of people. Yeah. And so once you start like connecting the dots in life, and you start having an appreciation for all those things, everything changes. Everything gets a completely different depth to it. And where I took it in terms of my relationship and understanding is that, the masculine and the feminine, there's a sacred dance between these two. And I believe that the feminist movement that we've kind of seen since the 50s and 60s is really doing a huge injustice to women, in the sense that it has accomplished some things. I won't completely negate it. But as long as you are seeking validation and recognition from the masculine, which is outside of you, you have no sovereignty. Yes. And so what I'm a big believer in is that feminine sovereignty. You don't need any validation or any recognition from anything. You're just by yourself in your feminine divinity. You are whole. You don't need any recognition from the masculine. You just need to be respected and worshipped for what you are. And similarly, and vice versa, right? Yes. So when we can move the relationships between the masculine and feminine to that, we can create a lot more beauty than what we are generally doing in the world today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said, that when you allow the feminine energy within yourself open up, your masculinity just explodes. I've seen that happen. And it's the most beautiful thing, but it also happens the other way around too. When I was in this amazing relationship with my twin flame, like my heart's always open. I've been hurt, crushed, torn apart, but for some reason, I just kept on holding my heart open. I still have it open to today, regardless of what happened in my past, because the heart will always give me the red flags if the person's not right for me. But if I have it blocked off, that means I'm not giving the energy, the space to say, hey, this is a red flag here. Don't go down that path, move down this way. But when I was just like, I put down my barrier, say, you know what, you don't need to protect yourself anymore. You have your divine man beside you that's protecting you, that's watching over you. Just be you in your space. That allowed me to bring up more of my feminine energy. And when I've never allowed myself to do that in a relationship before, because I've always been judged. Even if I was vulnerable, there was like, oh, you're one of those. It's like, what does that even mean? Oh, you remind me of my ex-boyfriend or my ex-girlfriends, or you remind me of this. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I'm bringing up the past of what I remind you of, because right now you're never going to feel like the way you feel. I could guarantee you that, because I remind you of 10 of your girlfriends in one body. How lucky are you? I used to say, this is one thing I used to say to men, like, you are lucky you're dating 10 of your girlfriends in one shot, right? But the level of femininity that came out of me when I just allowed and trusted at that point to say, hey, this feels kind of safe right now. Not fully in that place of safety and security, but you could literally let yourself free a little bit right now. Right. And that's when pure love, more love came out. And what happens, what I noticed just through my own journey through this process, is that the more I open up my heart, the more it kind of scared him, because he's never felt that before.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And then when you're getting this kind of love, is it never enough-itis? Am I not good enough?
No. Well, I think with love, there's never such a thing as exceeding any limit, right? Because we are in essence love. So
Mhm.
there's no such thing as excess love. I don't believe in that. I do think that when you really start dancing like what you're describing, right? I mean, and we each have obviously the opposite energy within us. So you have the masculine energy within you, and a man has feminine energy. Whether he has it integrated or not is a different thing.
Yeah.
And when you talk about sexual tension between two partners, you really are seeking as much tension on that arc as you can. So the more feminine you can be, the more masculine he can be, the more fire and passion you're creating between these two opposite poles.
Mhm.
And this is really what's so beautiful about all this stuff, because it's really whole by merging. But the distance and so very masculine men typically are very attracted to very feminine women, and the opposite around, right?
Mhm.
And so I believe when a man can integrate his feminine, and you can actually be more vulnerable, right? Have your heart more open. You are basically putting this masculine energy, this strength, basically on steroids. And
Mhm.
so what I found is that women really respond to that. I mean,
Mhm.
they're very attracted to that because now you can receive them,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You can hear them, and you can handle it, right? Because you're still grounded. You're still you're still in that masculine energy. And I think one of the things that some women ask me, because they're all looking for a conscious man, and I said, well, first of all, be careful what you wish for, right? Because he's not going to take any of your manipulation bullshit or any of that stuff. But besides that, what you think is a conscious man, right? Be very careful with this concept that you have, because a woman's, I call it emotional field. It's like the size of a soccer field,
Mhm.
right? In terms of width and depth. And for a man, it's about a tennis court.
Mhm.
He's never going to meet you in all the areas of emotional depth that you have. You don't want him to. You don't want him to be fucking all over the place. You want him to kind of stay tight on his little tennis court. He wants you to have an appreciation
Yeah.
that you will travel much further, much deeper than he is. But you don't want him to go with you. Don't be mistaken about that. Because then you have this floppy guy that's flappering all over the place. And someone's got to hold the fort down, right? And so, be careful what you wish for.
So when you're saying that he can't be a football field and stick him into the tennis court, let's go deeper into that, because
Mhm.
women might be like, well, what? He can't be expansive. He can't show me more love. He can't be this. He can't be
I'm
that.
not talking about love. I'm talking about emotional range.
But an emotion for some people, especially women that are seeking for external, I don't want to say this, but the external validation of a man's superiority, in a sense where I just want to love him. Why can't he join me on the football field? But a lot of women don't realize conscious men come in different forms too, depending on
Well,
how far they've been on this journey or how long
well,
they've been on this journey.
imagine you have the size of a football field, and then you overlay that with a tennis court. And he will join you in all those areas that are covered by the tennis court. But there are some areas, right? The areas of chaos where you go, you don't want him to go there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want him to be all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want him to have 5 thoughts at the same moment.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to rely on him that,
Keep you
he's
grounded.
he's grounded,
Yeah. And
right?
keeping you
So,
grounded in your emotions.
right. And you want him to have those boundaries. And you want him to have a mission that he's dedicated to, that he's
Mhm.
single focused, that he's focusing all his energy in. You don't want a man that's like spritzing his life force in 100 million directions, getting nothing fucking done, right? You want him to be narrow and laser focused, because that's the strength, that's the power that you want to feel. And
Mhm.
sometimes you want to run into a hard service when you cross the boundaries a little bit, when you're testing. Sometimes you want him to just say, no, sorry, can't do that right now.
Sometimes you don't want him to say no.
Sometimes you don't, but
But
you
yeah, I
know,
get what you're talking about.
but you don't want a guy that you can just manipulate all over the place and
No,
that's flailing all over the place and every day he's coming home and his emotions are all over the place. You don't want
no,
that. That doesn't feel good,
no.
right? And it doesn't feel good for him because it's not his masculine essence, what he's, here to bring into the world. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel good to him at all.
no, totally. I totally
And
understand where you're coming from in that sense because men are not the emotional seekers out there. Well, they are emotional seekers, but men are not ones that show emotion so easily and quickly. And I understand that
and I'm
because
not I'm not talking about showing it. I'm just saying, like, when we really anchor in our consciousness, right? We have boundaries with how far we let our emotions, because emotions are
Mhm,
are something that with our consciousness we can put some boundaries around.
mhm,
And a feminine woman by definition is wild and untamed and free.
mhm,
She's all over the place. That's the beauty that she brings, right? She brings this chaos into your life. She brings all this wildness into your life. And she's testing you a little bit. Can you keep your cool around that, right? And so that's testing your masculinity. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful game.
mhm.
She needs to know she can rely on you. She needs to know she can trust you.
In so many ways. But could we talk about the emotion because
Sure.
of everything that goes on, especially the stigma around men not being able to show emotion or they have a fear of showing emotion. And I know we're talking about emotions in football fields and tennis fields and to stay
I'm
grounded.
talking about range. I'm not talking about
Range, yes, the range of emotion.
I'm not talking about expressing it. That's something different. I agree with you. A lot of men are suck at it because we're not taught that we are able to
Mhm.
speak about this, right? I mean, from a very small little, we're supposed to be Marlboro man, like these stoic cowboys on, never talk about anything.
Yes.
Men
So
don't
for
cry. We're not weak. We don't know any of those things. And so,
I love when I see my men cry. That is something that is actually a turn on for me because it shows that you know what, I'm vulnerable.
mm,
And when I've seen a couple of guys cry on my shoulder and they're just like, I can't believe I did this. And I'm like, why? I said,
hmm right,
I'm here to hold that space for you to let go of whatever you're holding on to. And
sure,
personally, I think it's actually sexy that you are
hmm
actually releasing this because
right,
I think it's important because of the stigma that was put on since a child and being the Marlboro man at the end of the day. We have to break down those barriers because
I
these
agree.
days we're losing our masculine energy to all this other stuff that's going on. But we have to gain that because women are craving that more and more these days, more than
I agree.
anything. I'm finding it, right? So when it comes to men expressing their emotion and they have these, I want to say these roadblocks ahead of them, what are some things that you could tell men out there to kind of let go of those roadblocks and be more expressive in their emotion?
hmm well, first of all, I think, I describe in my book this radical honesty, which is this technique that you can start. So it's non-judgment, no repercussions, and unconditional love. And so it's described in my book. It's a method that we can use to really open
Mhm.
up and be more vulnerable. Um, you know, I come to believe that vulnerability really has to be rooted in self-love,
Mhm.
because as long as we don't believe we're enough and we're somehow seeking validation in the world, it's really difficult to be vulnerable because um, we're so impressionable by what the world tells us, and we're very impressionable by being rejected. And I think that is probably the number one thing. I mean, women have it in their own way, but for men to open up, the thought of being rejected, um, and being rejected by your woman is just like, I mean, it's like a castrating event, like, and so we have to feel safe, right? That we can open up and we won't be rejected. And I think this is where that safe place comes from. But internally, we have to be okay with being rejected, which we can only handle from a place of self-love, right? If we know we're enough and we're whole, I don't need anything in the world. There's nothing she can give me that I can't give myself, right? Or she or the world or anything, right? Once we're from that place, then, in Holland, we have this expression, you can't kick in an open door.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of how vulnerability works. Once we get to that place of strength, that inner strength, that self-love, then people really can't hurt you anymore. Of course, we still don't want to be rejected. We still don't like to hear, negative things about ourselves and be confronted with things, but we can handle it much better. So I would say the first thing for men to do to learn to be vulnerable is self-love. Where am I not loving myself? Where am I afraid of being rejected? And this can be with friends. This can be at your work environment. This can be in politics. This can be with your woman, with your family. It doesn't matter. It can be anywhere, right? Where am I not speaking my truth? Where am I holding back? Where am I swallowing words because I'm afraid I might get rejected?
Self-love, man. Self-love. Sounds easy, but it's not as hard. It sounds easy, but it's actually harder than it is to really go through that process.
Yeah, of course.
It's something that really, even for women, when they want to express that self-love,
of course,
because they want to be in that state of nurturing other people to avoid loving themselves enough to actually heal through the process of the pain and suffering.
Right. And again, I mean, you go back to like our lizard brain, 10,000 years ago, to be rejected from the tribe was a death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is stuff that's ancestral, it's very deeply wired. We don't want to be rejected ever. I mean, but we don't live 10,000 years ago. We're not, we don't live in small little tribes of 50 to 100 people. And, when someone rejects us now, it might hurt us emotionally, but it's not like a death sentence like it used to be. But, it triggers some of this old lizard brain stuff, because we want to be accepted. We want to be understood. I have, another book I'm working on, and one of the big themes that I have with all my coaching clients, I can relate almost anything back to our human desire to be seen, heard, and loved.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most core desire that we have, right? And so rejection is not being seen, not being heard, and not being loved. Yeah. It really hurts us where we're living. I mean, it's just visceral. So it's not so easy to be vulnerable. It's not so easy to expose ourselves. And then obviously in an intimate relationship, there's all kinds of dynamics that enter into that as well, because your livelihoods are intertwined, and there's all kinds of other dynamics going on there too.
Yeah, absolutely. But once you get in that state of vulnerability, guys, seriously, at the end of the day, your life has changed because you're really not holding on to any baggage anymore. So when you literally put everything in a bag and say, you know what, I'm going to become vulnerable and just let down the guard and let go of all the suffering, pain, wounds that I'm holding on to be expressive in my divinity, your life has changed that instant you decide to create that change. So
yeah, and let me add this to it. It's not just that. There's a much bigger perk, right? Because for men, we have such a thing as status and significance, which really comes from the outer world. It comes from the money, the titles, the cars we have, maybe the arm candy that we walk around with. But then we have something that's much more valuable. It's called presence and charisma. And presence and charisma comes from authenticity. And authenticity comes from being fully expressed. When we really fully express our truth in a loving and compassionate way, we become magnetic. Because everybody craves, men and women alike, right? As a man, if you can show up in a highly authentic way, and you've met people like this, they walk into the room and they have a presence about them, they have charisma about them, right? That is from the inside out. That is that light shining out. That's someone that's expressing their truth. They're beyond the bullshit. They're not playing a role anymore. They're not acting anymore. The masks have all come off, right? And that's where vulnerability really leads you to. So for men, vulnerable is, I want to be vulnerable. It doesn't sound great. Well, how about I want to have presence and charisma? Well, how do I get there? Well, the bridge to get there is vulnerability, really, truly expressing yourself. And you'll get presence and charisma. I don't know a man that doesn't want to have presence and charisma.
Yeah, and you speak about that in your book when you come to the vulnerability section, how you didn't really like the word vulnerability
I
until you
hated it.
start until you
I
start.
still don't like it. I'm a guy.
I know.
I talk about it, but I still don't like it.
I know, that's why I'm like, okay, we'll change that to presence and charisma. But it's true, though, at the end of the day, that is the presence because you're showing up in your fullness. But you said something about previous to that. You said, you know, we want to have that money and we want to have those goals, and that's what brings us that presence. But let's go back to the pre-Robert, the beginning stages of your awakening, because everything that you've gone through, you did well in business, you had multi-million-dollar companies, you traveled the world, real estate, you had a crazy Colombia story that I was just like blown away by that story. Guys, you have to get this book, Never Enoughitis. You're going to be up and down, wondering what's going on. You had all these things happening to you. You were on the highest of the high because you were chasing these deals. Like these deals were like candy to you. Like, I need it, I got to get it. It's like you're fueling from a different source. Compared to how you're fueling today, what would you say the biggest difference is in both? Because there's men that are still chasing those things that you once chased, right? So I want to talk to that man. I want to talk to that corporate man for a second that's chasing those deals. That's chasing.
All right. Let me try to explain it. So when I coach men, there's basically two worlds that we balance. One is worldly success, and one is spiritual realization.
Mm-hmm.
Most men like me, I was solely focused on worldly success. And that has a shadow side, which is greed, which is hedonism, which is, causing harm in this world. But I was very heavily focused and very successful in that world until I exhausted my ability to get pleasure and joy from that, because I had done it all, which is never enoughitis. And then I, went to the other side and, well, what else is there? Well, the next level up is spiritual realization. And when we can actually balance these two, we have actually a more complete life. So now we have spiritual depth, but we're still, also very successful in the world, which we can balance these two. We're earthly beings. We're here to create abundance. There's nothing wrong with having big businesses, beautiful cars, or creating a beautiful life. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There's nothing not spiritual about being rich.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Now, causing harm in the world, that's not very spiritual, right? Because we are not realizing the unity of this world. We're just in separation mode. So the worldly success is the game man plays, and it's got a certain amount of rules. And then there's a spiritual realization, which is the game spirit plays, and it has a different set of rules. And when we learn those rules and we can kind of balance these two, we become different people. Now, I will explain it in a different way now. When you think about men, we are basically governed by testosterone, right? And so when we're somewhat unconscious, which is worldly success for the most part, when we're just lost in worldly success, we're just chasing stuff, we're just chasing the marbles, we're chasing the trophies, the accolades, whatever it is. So if you project that in the dating world, we're just chasing women. And as soon as there's a beautiful woman that comes on our radar, a woman that we desire, right, our testosterone starts raging through our, and we lose all sense of anything, and we just go chase, and we have to have it. Now, when we're in this game that spirit plays, we recognize this testosterone that's raging through our veins, and we laugh at it. And we engage with it. And you say, okay, do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? Do I want to play this game? Do I not want to play today? Now I'm in control. Consciousness is in control. And we do this same thing in the worldly success. We do it with consciousness. So today, when I want to have worldly success, when I want to chase a business, I turn on my fire and I go get it. I make sure I don't cause any harm, right? And I go after it. And I make lots of money, and I make it as successful as I can. And sometimes they fail, and sometimes they go really well. But there's a consciousness about it. I control it. It does not control me, right? And this is the same, when I engage with women these days. I control what happens because I know I'm in control. And this is my consciousness, right? I still have the testosterone. She's driving me crazy. She even knows she's driving me crazy, but she knows I'm in control, which drives her crazy because I have the one thing that she needs, which is love.
Mm-hmm.
She controls the whole universe. Otherwise, she's driving me absolutely nuts, right? So this is for men. When you go into the material world, is the material world, is the shiny shit driving you crazy, right? Are you just blindly chasing it, or are you in control? Do you pick and choose and determines what happens? Who gets your life force? Life force being your creative energy, your sexual energy, which is how we create. Now, when we're in control of our consciousness, we can do anything in the material world that we want. We just do it without harm. We do it in a conscious way. We don't get lost in it. Like I got lost in it. I got lost in the game. I got lost in the power. I got lost in chasing business, deals, money, houses, cars, women. I mean, I got lost in all of it. And it was never fucking enough. Because no matter how much I chased it, right, there was always like more testosterone coming up and I wasn't in control.
Yeah.
So this is the spiritual realization part and marrying that with the worldly success. Now, if we get lost in spiritual realization, we get the ponytailed yogi guy that has a lot of women around him, but he can't pay his fucking rent.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with that guy. He's just lost on the spiritual side, right? There's people that lose their earthly, they have earthly impotence, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of men that kind of lose themselves in the spiritual world. And that's not the game that we play here on earth because, you know, we live here to actually create things in this world and pay our rent on time and make sure we have a beautiful life and we can provide for our family, our kids, and create the experiences that we desire, whatever that is. If that experience is a private plane, beautiful, go create that. If that experience is living somewhere comfortably in a small little house and just having a lot of time and you can read your books, that's beautiful too. You know, we don't really judge where you are on the social status. That really has no relevance whatsoever. It's like, how do we create it?
Mm-hmm.
Does any of that make sense?
Totally. Because my next question is, how does a man bring both his testosterone and his spirituality together in a beautiful marriage where now he's evolved into something more empowering with himself?
Well, that's a journey within, right? And I think when we're born, especially here in the Western world, I mean, the first journey we make is the journey in the outside world, because we're told that if we're successful in school and then have a good career and we make money and we get the cars, the houses, and all that stuff. And so that's our first journey out in the world. And then at some point when you're exhausted getting your joy or your pleasure from that, or you realize like, shit, this is not really giving me lasting joy, right? Then we are being presented with this, well, there's another part. This is the spiritual realization part. That's the part where we go inside. We go find the inner wealth. And what we find there is that everything we ever wanted is actually inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
All the abundance in the world, all the joy, all the happiness, all the things, the stuff that lasts is actually inside of us. And so, you know, it's kind of like most of us don't go there first. I mean, we kind of have to exhaust our play in this material world and create some kind of crisis that the whole thing implodes, like in my life, or we just get to the end of it at some stage. It could be an illness where we're presented with physical illness. This happens to a lot of women, actually, breast cancer, things like that. It's like it's really this moment where your life is arrested. Well, to me, that's just the universe waking you up, saying like, hey, you have something to examine, right? And so for men, it could be a divorce, it could be a business that fails, it could be illness as well. It could be, you know, it's usually something to that extent because we really only respond to crisis or catastrophe. You know, that's how we wake up, and that's how we kind of like stop the presses and like, oh shit, now I got to change something because it's really blowing up in my life. And then the spiritual realization, it's a personal journey, but it's really the journey within, right? It's like, you know, it's this consciousness. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my body. I'm actually the observer behind it, you know, and how do I integrate that concept in a beautiful way that I can still be a productive beautiful citizen in this world and create some magic, create beauty, because we're here to create. We're here to enjoy
Yeah.
life. You know, this
Yeah.
is a world, this is an abundant world, and we're here to bring our gifts into the world. And we all have very unique gifts and superpowers. And so then the question becomes like, what is your true gift? What is your true superpower? What are you uniquely suited to add to this world? And once you find that alignment, you know, that's where your purpose is. That's where you find flow. That's where you find things are coming with a lot more ease and a much more fulfillment than probably another path where you were just doing what, you know, your parents thought was a good career for you.
So when you're speaking about purpose, like I want to know on a man's perspective, is this kind of something that comes up in my thoughts a lot? For a woman, it's like, okay, she's always seeking her purpose in her life in a sense. But for a man, he also is seeking his purpose. But then when he goes from the external world into the internal world within himself, and then he sees there might be some clashing between the outside and the inside. And he says, you know what? I might not be where I'm supposed to be right now. There's another purpose for me, but it may feel a little foreign to him. How does a man deal with going through a foreign situation to open up that inside part of him, that I guess that deeper sense of love, but you don't recognize it as love at that time because it's more self-love. But how does he go from that dynamic into another dynamic?
Let me start by saying, and I write about it in my book, that I think the purpose of life is growth.
Yes.
It is the only purpose in life. Like we get really hung up on, is my purpose to start a company? Is my purpose to be a doctor or to be the, no. Those are just all, you know, means to an end. Your purpose in life is to grow, period. That's your only purpose, to grow and evolve as a soul, right? And so now we can't really fuck up anymore, because no matter where you are, what you're doing in life, you're just growing and evolving. Doesn't matter what the fuck you do. Really doesn't matter. You can choose what's fun to you, right? Choose what calls you, you know, what brings you alive, what brings you a challenge. And so I think once we start looking that way at life, you know, there's no more failures. So now we can start looking at, well, I'm going to do something that's uncomfortable, because usually we try to avoid anything that's uncomfortable. I write about that in my book as well. So we don't really grow and evolve that much because our brain is wired to keep us comfortable. Well, we have to change our relationship with comfort, right? Because if we want to grow and evolve, if you want to become fit, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to go to the gym. You have to have some, you know, some aches in the morning when you wake up. You know, you have to kind of get through that. If we want to learn a language, we're going to have to be uncomfortable in learning, you know, grammar and sentence structure and vocabulary, and like, you know, we're going to have to practice, which is uncomfortable because we don't command the language yet. If we want to learn a new profession, we want to become a Reiki healer, well, you know, now you have to learn where all the meridians are. You know, it's uncomfortable, right? So anything that we really want to explore in life, it's always going to be on the other side of comfort. But if you believe that there's no failure because we're just growing and evolving, so you can't really fuck it up, you can't really make a wrong decision. There's no such thing as a wrong decision, because the moment you make a decision, that is what was supposed to be. So there's no wrong decision, right? So we don't have to be in doubt and anxiety about any of this stuff. We just make a decision. We go that way. And if we decide like, okay, you know, this wasn't the right way, well, we take a turn. No big deal. You know, we just move on. We keep growing and evolving.
Yes. And you've said that throughout your whole book. Life is about growing. Life is about evolving. You've said that a couple of times that I've read, especially in the love chapter and the one previously to that, when it's the Phoenix Rising area, the book, the part 3 area. So so would you say it's a shift in perception though, because we've been so implemented with all these different beliefs within us?
Yeah, of course.
And men even further, because they're the provider, they are the protectors.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of social stigma around that, that we're raised with. But, you know, I do believe that there is some, you know, listen, I mean, it's if you can't pay your rent, it's very hard to be spiritual if you don't know where your rent check is going to come from. So I also, I'm a very grounded person in that sense, that there's some realities in this life too, and, we got to pay rent, pay electricity, get food on the table, and then we can start worrying about other stuff. So, um, I do believe that I don't care how you do it, but I do think that you should just make sure that, you take care of the basics in life, right? And, if you're going to do that in an area where you're passionate, you're probably going to be really good at it. So you're going to provide a lot of value. And when you provide a lot of value, your prices raise because there's more demand for it. And so you can raise your prices and you can make good money with it. And you can make good money with anything. There's I mean, to give you an example, like a lot of people say, well, you go in this spiritual path and, nobody makes any money. But I can tell you there's Reiki healers that, make no money. And there's Reiki healers that make $100,000 a year. It just depends. So, it doesn't matter what you do. It's the energy you do it with. And if you're really passionate about it, you're going to be good at it. Right. And then you're going to be able to command value for it. And none of that, all of that is just, living life. It's growing and evolving.
Would you say it's about seeing your self-worth and how much money you make, and if you're worthy of receiving that money? Because there is spiritual people that are making 6 figures, 7 figures even.
Sure.
And there's that, but I see, yeah, and exactly, because I've had people say, well, I remember when I first got into this work, I mean, I've been connected to spirit since I was 3 years old, ran away from it, came back to it, ran away from it. And when I started to use it as a career, I remember I was talking to someone, they said, oh, so when can I come and see you? And I said, well, you can come on Friday and it's X amount of dollars. Like, you charge for that? And I said, well, do I charge for it? I said, I don't know. My mortgage has to get paid. My bills have to get paid. This has to get paid. You are giving God's gift a price tag. And I said, well, God's the one that gave me the price tag to give you. So people have this misconception that if you're spiritual, that money is not spiritual. But let's go back into Christianity days, or Jesus days, I'm going to call it, because that's just Jesus. Back in those days, there was gold. That's considered money. That was the exchange. Now we're just using
anything of value is an
exchange.
Is a currency, right? I mean,
yeah.
So gold, silver, coins, bartering. I mean, it's all currency.
Yeah.
And just to distill this notion, I actually, the purpose of life on earth, right? If you think about us as eternal beings, as souls that come here, is to be in the world of form. And the world of form is a world of creation, which is ever changing, always dynamic. Everything in this world, every single second is changing and evolving, and it's always kinetically moving forward. And so form and creation are an integral part of nature. It's an integral part of growth, of evolution. It's of our life. And there's nothing non-spiritual, because money is really just energy. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's nothing dirty about it, because what's bad about energy? Energy is just a representation of value. And so if you create a lot of value for other people, you can be highly compensated. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a billionaire or being a century millionaire or whatever. It doesn't matter. There's no limits to what you can have. Now, if you're purposely and willingly causing harm in the world, that's different. That's greed, right? But if you're just acting in creation, you're just creating beautiful things in this world, which could be an artwork like Picasso did. It could be a piece of music like Beethoven, or it could be a company, because that's what a businessman does. That's what an entrepreneur does. That's his art. He creates businesses, right? Ventures, whatever. It just happens to be his art. And if you create a lot of value for a lot of people, you can be highly rewarded for that. And it's just a representation of energy. That's all it is. There's nothing dirty about it. There's nothing bad about it. Now, when we willfully cause harm in the world, it's something different, right? That's greed.
Absolutely. So this is one thing I like to say, and I've said this in different podcasts, guys. It's a childhood belief that has been put in us that like money is evil, all that stuff. So we have to clear that money energy sometimes, or all the time, when we go into that place. So that is something that we have to look at, because I've had so many people say, no spiritual
Yeah.
person I know is wealthy. And I'm like, well, at the end of the day,
It's
that's
bullshit.
their own belief and wealth and worth, self-worth that they're putting
Yeah, I
themselves
think
through.
that's bullshit. I think that's bullshit. Those two, business is inherently spiritual. Anything that's
Yes.
anything creation, right? Which comes from creative energy. It comes from your second chakra, which is really sexual energy.
Mhm.
Sexual energy creates life, but it creates everything in life,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so when we can harvest that sexual energy, and it's actually wedged between our root chakra, which is the foundation, earthly matters, right? Survival. And then it's, in our solar plexus, which is willpower. So when you can activate those three chakras in a very positive way, now you can be very creative and forceful and powerful in this world and create beautiful things, which again could be music, could be art, could be science, could be a business. It doesn't matter.
Anything.
And if you can be wildly compensated for that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're helping and contributing to society and contributing to humanity. Just don't
Very
cause
true.
any harm. Right?
Very true. I believe in that. I believe in everything you're saying, but there are these other beliefs that are out there that's what
I
we
know.
have to change, is that paradigm and those belief systems. And I
It's
can't
not the
believe
money. It's not the money that's bad.
it's not the money that's
It,
bad.
it's how it's created
Exactly. Or it's how it's used at the same time.
or used or abused or misused, right? But this is where people lose themselves in the games of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
misuse and abuse power.
Yeah. Robert, I can't believe we're at the top of the hour with this conversation. I haven't even
Thank
gotten
you.
into the book, The Way of the Superior Man. I want to talk about that, even though I want to talk about your book and how this kind of all intertwines. But a couple of questions before we go. Are you good with
Please.
that?
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. Go for it.
What does unconditional love mean to you?
Eternal.
Ooh, deep. Ooh. I want you all to feel that one. Rewind a little bit and feel what he just said that. That was deep. That is so true. Internal. Love that. What would you tell your younger self today?
Everything is always in perfect order.
Ooh, so true. Don't you wish we knew that when we were younger?
I wish so. Yeah, would have saved me a lot of trouble,
Right.
a lot of heartache, and a lot of anxiety. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. What would you tell anyone that's going through a hard time right now with life?
You are so much more powerful than you know you are.
Amen.
You are so much more than you believe you are right now.
So true. So true. I wish I kept on reminding myself that when I was hitting depression. You're so much more powerful, even though my guides would tell me that. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm weak right now. What would you tell your future self today?
Forgive yourself earlier.
Ooh, good one. Forgive yourself earlier. That was awesome.
Yeah, and I want to add this because I just had a discussion with this beautiful person from Tasmania that I know. The real mastery of forgiveness is actually in never condemning, because then we don't have to forgive.
That's so true.
And so, because we judge and condemn ourselves and the rest of the world, now we have to forgive later to undo that. So if you think about this universal intelligence, source, God, creator, at that level, there is zero condemnation. There's only love. So there's God will never forgive you, because God will never condemn you in the first place, right? So mastery of forgiveness is actually never to condemn.
That is beautiful. And that's also with dropping your expectations, because when you have expectations, that's when you go through a whole other form. But when you don't have those expectations and you don't have that other stuff that follows expectations, and you just go with the flow, love just brews even further. There are so many other parts of your book that I wanted to talk about. The Northern Star, how you found the Northern Star, because that was another aha moment
North
that
Star.
I had.
Star. Yeah.
The North Star. I should say. I'm thinking about being up north right now, but that was a really deep part. So everyone, the book is called Never Enoughitis. It will be in the show notes below. There will be a link there where you can purchase the book.
Well,
I highly
you can
recommend
always invite me again and we'll have a second conversation. How's
We
that?
can have a whole week of conversation with so
We
much
can do
stuff
that
to
too.
talk
We
about.
can do that too.
We might do a series for y'all and really marry the divine masculine and feminine energies in here. But
I'd love
Robert,
that.
thank you so much for being on the show right now. This has
Oh,
been
thank you.
this has been amazing, and we haven't even gotten to half of the things I wanted to talk about.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. It was a fantastic conversation. So, invite me again. We'll have it again. We'll talk more.
We'll do
Be
it
my
again,
pleasure.
ladies and gentlemen. We'll do it again for sure. So everyone, thank you for listening. If you want to get a hold of Robert and get the book, Never Enoughitis, because it's so true. Not only men go through the Never Enoughitis, but women, we are part of the not enoughitis. And that's why we get stuck in these situations in our life that hold us hostage, not only in our mind, but on our pursuit of happiness, growth, and purpose. And everything's going to be in the show notes below. Also join us in our private Facebook group, the Empress Hangout, and like us on Instagram. Until we meet again, have yourself a great day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.